You know what would really help your bottom line in 2025? Lower inflation. And I'm not just talking about transitory price hikes here. I mean persistent inflation that has been sticking around longer than we expected, and central banks are struggling to get it down. A new report from the World Trade Organization suggests that easing trade tensions and reducing protectionism could help bring down prices faster. Hello and welcome back. I'm here with the latest. The WTO said on Tuesday that global trade is set to grow by 1.7% in both 2023 and 2024. And here is the kicker, 3% in 2025. That's notably faster than the 2.4% forecast in September. So why the upgrade? Well, the WTO says that this is due to our baseline forecast assuming a significant reduction in trade barriers. And here's the thing, the world's major economies have actually been working together more than usual. The G20 accounted for almost 80% of global GDP last year. And this year, for the first time ever, the combined budget of the G20 nations exceeded $60 trillion, which is more than double the annual global output. But will they use this firepower to tackle the shared challenge of inflation? Well, it depends on what happens next in the Russia-Ukraine war and whether or not China reopens its borders, because both events will heavily influence the global economy. And of course, there's also the US election in 2024. A lot can happen between now and then. So let's take a look at what's driving the WTO's upgrade. Firstly, the volume of merchandise trade is expected to increase by 3% in both 2023 and 2024. And here is the key, that 3% growth is expected to accelerate to 4.4% in 2025. Secondly, the growth in trade is expected to outpace growth in global output, which means that trade will make a positive contribution to economic growth. Thirdly, if trade barriers come down as assumed in the baseline forecast, inflation could ease somewhat. And lastly, risks to this baseline forecast remain elevated. Now, I want to focus on this point because it's the most interesting to me. According to the report, the baseline forecast is based on several assumptions about future trade policies. These assumptions are that the current geopolitical tensions do not escalate into a broader trade conflict. The EU-UK trade deal is implemented without further delay, and the US-China tech decoupling does not intensify. Now, if these assumptions hold up, global trade will expand by 3% in 2025. However, if the geopolitical situation deteriorates, global trade will contract by 2.3%. That's a big range, 5.3 percentage points between the two scenarios. So, what is this report telling us? Well, firstly, the global economy is still in good shape. Global trade is expected to keep growing, albeit at a slower pace. Secondly, the biggest risk to this outlook is a deterioration in the geopolitical situation. And thirdly, and this is the most important takeaway, if the world's major economies stick to the rules of the game and reduce trade barriers as planned, we could see faster growth and lower inflation. What if trade barriers were reduced even further? Let's say, for example, the G20, who collectively represent 80% of global GDP, decided to cut tariffs by 50%. What would that do to the global economy? Well, according to the WTO simulations, global output would be 10% higher, global trade would be 20% higher, and inflation would be 1% lower. So you see, trade isn't just about moving goods across borders. It's about keeping the global economy running smoothly. And when things get bumpy, like the war in Ukraine or rising inflation, we all suffer. That's why it's so important for the world's major economies to work together and reduce trade barriers. Of course, this isn't easy to do, especially when there are so many competing interests. But if they can pull it off, it will benefit all of us. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends.